337 tons of toxic waste stored for decades at India's defunct Union Carbide factory have been moved out of the city of Bhopal. The material has been transported to an incineration plant in Pithampur in the state of Madhya Pradesh. It's the final stage in clean-up efforts since a toxic gas leak more than 40 years ago. Officials say incineration could take 3 to 9 months. Last month, the High Court in Madhya Pradesh accused authorities of inaction and issued a 4-week deadline for this disposal. Bhopal's Gas, Tragedy Relief and Rehabilitation Department says disposal will be carried out in a manner posing no harm to the environment. Contamination from the leak has been a health hazard for thousands of residents living near the abandoned factory. More than 15,000 people are known to have died in the years since one of the tanks belonging to a US-owned pesticides plant shattered its concrete casing in December 1984. And for more, Ishan Garg joins us live from New Delhi. Ishan, this is not the first time authorities have tried to move this toxic hazardous waste from Bhopal. This time, what has the reaction been like?
You're absolutely right. This is not the first time. It's actually been 40 years since the disastrous accident in 1984. And since then, authorities have been trying to get rid of the residual waste that's still lying there, seeping into the ground water table beneath and still contaminating and affecting lives of tens of thousands of people. And the reaction this time also has been pretty similar to what we've seen in the past. The people who are residents of the city of Pithampur, where all of this 307 metric tons of residual toxic waste is being taken to be burnt down. They are protesting. They are saying that all this toxic waste, once it's been burnt, it could release pollutants into the air, into the water, and also into the agricultural field. And they say, God knows how much of a havoc that's going to wreak on the lives of people. Now, the government says that it has already taken necessary precautions. It says that once all this toxic element has been moved to Pithampur through a green corridor, it's going to be very carefully burnt in a chemical facility, and then it's going to be separated from the soil using two layers of very thick non-permeable material, one at the bottom and another on the top, just to make sure that none of it percolates into the soil. Apart from that, the government also says that a feasibility study was conducted in 2015 where 10 metric tons of the same toxic waste was burnt at a facility, and it found that it did not actually contribute to any pollution. But the residents there are saying that when those 10 metric tons were burnt, it did actually contribute to pollution. And experts are also pointing out another factor. They say that burning 10 tons is one thing, but burning 337, that could still have adverse impacts. But the project manager in charge of this whole operation has said that the government has made all sorts of facilities, has put them in place to ensure that people are not suffering from the after effects, and has said that none of this toxic waste, once burnt, will contribute to any kind of pollution, air, land or water.
All right, Ishan, of course, this is just over 40 years since the actual disaster, and that happened, of course, in December 1984. On that 40th anniversary, just about a month ago, Amnesty International on its website decried, quote, the woefully inadequate and callous response towards the victims and survivors of the Bhopal gas tragedy. It blamed environmental racism. What did it mean by that?
It's quite a loaded word, environmental racism, but Amnesty International, along with many activists and environmentalists here in India, do believe that has been the case, because for starters, right after the tragedy in 1984, the CEO of Carbide Union was being asked to be extradited from the US to come to India to be charged with criminal offences here. After all, nearly 3,500 people had died in the immediate aftermath of the disaster, and more than 5,000 people would die in the next few days. And now experts estimate that some 500,000 people might have died from the knock-on effects of that massive disaster. And still to this date, nobody from the Union Carbide factory, or that company which was later sold to the chemical giant Dow, has been criminally indicted in India. In 1989, actually, the the company settled lawsuits with the Indian government and agreed to pay compensation, but only the Indian managers of the plant were criminally tried and charged here in India. And many experts would say that it's a form of environmental racism when the corporate giants in Western, more powerful, more richer countries are not held accountable for a tragedy of this size. There's also criticism from the experts who are now saying that the waste that is being transported to a different Indian city this time around, it should have been sent overseas and should have been disposed of in a separate site. And that would have been a better way to deal with an impending crisis that this toxic waste could produce. We have seen in the past few years that similar protests erupted in different states like Maharashtra, in Gujarat as well. Many of them asking for this toxic waste to be completely removed. And now experts say that and none of the Western countries, particularly the US, taking responsibility for this massive disaster in 1984 is a form of environmental racism.
Ishan Garg reporting live from Delhi on this removal of toxic waste, 337 tons from the city of Bhopal.